What's up? Well, so fast. So good. Also, I also have almost like instantaneously audio feedback. Amazing. I think I think it works. I can probably stop hearing myself. Uh, just yeah, I think it works. I'm happy with how it sounds, so I don't really have much to say in that sense. We are good actually, so yeah. Anyway, uh, I don't know. We have like 4 minutes. There is literally not much more to do in the meanwhile. Also, yeah, I mean, I still feel weird. I don't really know. No, I kinda don't know why. I kinda know why. Yeah, it's crazy to say that I don't. But anyways, I I don't I don't really know. I think I have just like one idea. I I particularly wanna talk out today. There are like way too many things that we could also try to talk about, but I prefer this one. So yeah, that's that, I guess. And yeah, I don't I don't know. I don't think I have much more to say besides that. I mean, probably. I think something funny is yeah. Let me say rapidly. There are like many other discussions to have, but it's kind of crazy to think that it's not an obligation service. It's not a necessity to talk out any of those things, but it's more along the lines of yeah, we can try to do that, and we should try to do that. But at the same time, it's I wouldn't say exactly meaningless, not as productive to focus so much on all of those sort of things, I guess. But yeah, that's I guess my point. Uh, Something else? I don't know. You have like 2 more minutes. Uh, it's crazy. You prepare yourself with time, and now you realize, wow, I have 3 minutes instead of having two or like very limited minutes in which I need to do everything else. It's good, I guess. It's better than to not have anything. I wouldn't say exactly ready. It's not having anything ready, but yeah, it's more along the lines of just learning to take care of stuff. I guess that's what I'm trying to talk about. Anyways, the point is, it's going to be crazy. It's going to be actually complicated. But anyway, we, as always, in the mind we trust, I guess, so that it goes well, somewhat properly. Anyways, thank you. No, no, yeah, yeah. I don't really have that much more to say. So, we have supposedly 30 seconds free. It's kind of, I wouldn't say exactly meaningless, but it's unnecessary, rather. So, yeah, the point is here we are. Good evening. It has been such a long time. How much it has been like I don't know. It's that eternal complication. It always feels like a week or so. I was thinking about this week, not this week. What? Not no, not nothing about that. It was I was thinking yesterday about going like that. Yeah, it's complicated to do that. I think it's something kind of hard to understand that. Yeah, you have sometimes to actually stop, sit down, calm down, probably, and whatnot. And if it doesn't happen in the right way, it kinda doesn't lead to anything useful. So it's nice to have the possibility of being here after. Yeah, I guess consciously stopping, settling down, calming down, and whatnot. So yeah, it's good. But anyways, here we are after I don't know a while. I think it's as always a good enough while, so sufficient for us. Something else, I don't know. Nothing much has really happened. I I guess I just keep trying to, as always, get an even better picture of everything. That's as much as I can actually say. I I mean, probably I should say something about it in some way. Yeah. It was a very interesting. What is it? Weekend. I will say I wasn't really expecting to. It's always an interesting challenge. Let's say when you have to do something and you find yourself like extremely drained of not energy, but more like you have. I guess if I was talking with someone else, I might even describe them as having like depleted their brain from all the funny chemicals and whatnot. So yeah, it's it's going to be something interesting to try. I I was sort of looking forward to today particularly, but we have to actually work on saying anything, doing anything, focusing on anything. So yeah, that's far more complicated, I guess, more interesting, more challenging. But I don't know. I guess we should actually start. Nothing, nothing of actual weight can also be said. Besides that, it's like no, yeah. This week there is no scale. I don't feel like having a scale. At least I think I will try to commit to that decision. I think it's good to sometimes not scale stuff. I think if everything goes well, we should be capable of being here. Wow, for a good enough time, but the reality is, or not exactly for a good, no, it's more along the lines of yeah, being here the whole week, I guess, consistently enough throughout the week, and that's unavoidably sort of complicated. As always, it's not an obligation, so we will see how it goes. It's first and foremost for the sake of us being content with the decision, so we will choose throughout the rest of this short-lived week. Anyways, besides that, yeah, no, for real, nothing else to actually so far. Nothing of. I don't know. One day, it's also like an interesting question. What is going to be actually an interesting thing to announce in the near future? I don't think there is that much to actually say or to comment on or to promise or anything like that. It's most of what we have is good actually, so no need to add anything else, I guess. It's nice enough already. So yeah. Now, without having anything else to actually try to see, to actually, I guess, lose our time, considering if it is if it is even necessary to mention or something like that. Yeah, uh, we can continue a little bit. Today is the only thing that I actually wanted to think about a little bit aloud. I guess is philosophy in itself. It's always an interesting endeavor, but at the same time, it's something complicated. Mostly yeah, there is this whole explanation of things in a very broad sense of we end up having quite an easy time thinking out the things that we consistently enough visit in our own heads without ever mentioning it to anyone else. Because to a certain degree, we also learn how to optimize what we are talking about, or what we are, what we are thinking about, and also when we do so, there are many instances in which funny events of oh wow yeah, I didn't realize that I was actually making shortcuts and starting to make assumptions about stuff. So I was maybe even because of my methods utilized reaching the wrong conclusions, and that is in itself quite an interesting thing when you have to express what is it that you actually think about besides that, I guess, or besides, yeah, once it stops being something that you understand and that you don't have to mention ever, and it becomes something that needs to be expressed in an understandable way, it gets that extra layer of, ah, wow, I have discovered now that I actually wasn't truly conscious of the reality of, yeah, I might have way too many filters imposed, overlaid, so to speak, or yeah, I think overlaid is a good word, affecting what is it that I am trying to explain, and it's fine, anyways. I I just think that yeah, to some degree, it's it's an interesting challenge, and I cannot really get angry about that. So, anyways, it's today. It's let me start with this one. I have been thinking for quite a long time about this guy. I remember I have mentioned him a little bit in not so recent times. It might have been like at the best 2 months, 3 months since the last time that I actually directly mentioned him. I guess yeah, to some degree it's useful to have awareness of this person, but at the same time it's also one of those philosophers in themselves, or I would rather say writers who possess ideas that are interesting that at the same time don't actually contribute in any other way. And it's, yes, something nice to have, but not exactly something that I will say everyone should actually try to possess in their hands. I think that I let me say, Emil Cioran is the guy that we're starting with as always. He's a very interesting guy and he has ways of thinking about the stuff that I guess would allow even the most positive person to slowly get to understand how to develop a more cynical method of thinking about the world, a more negative way of seeing reality, not because it is necessary to constantly live in the brink of depression. That's not exactly the message. It's more along the lines of yeah, one of those few writers who is can be, I wouldn't say honest enough, broad enough to not censor that side of themselves, and it is in that exploration of the utter darkness that sometimes I guess everyone can get to have, but most of us tries to repress, can lead to, and which ideas more so unavoidably with that whole other layer of ah wow yeah, this person is a very well learned individual who knows quite a lot about what they are talking about, or who possesses a big enough floritude in the language that they utilize and whatnot. Unavoidably in those cases, yeah, we have some dissimilar occurrences that makes persons of this sort far more interesting because at least the average person doesn't possess that much of a completely exuberant niche vocabulary, and it is still possible to maybe express the same concepts, but it is not something exactly achievable through the same methods. It might take 10 lines to say what somebody like him can express in just, I guess, 4 or 5, and it's being generous still sometimes. This wonderfulness of language is also that, yeah, sometimes once you learn how to manipulate language well enough, you find out that there are many ways in which you can picture stuff and in which you can say things that make enough sense so that it is understandable in much less time, and that's hard to do. That's not just hard in terms of, oh wow, yeah, this thing is complicated, but rather it is also something fun. Ah, yeah, yeah, I guess I'm fine. Welcome, Dharma. Also, different, or I, I remember I said hi before, but is it? Ah, yeah, I wasn't going crazy. I wasn't going crazy. New? No, yeah, I was going to say uh, new as in, what is it? It says first intervention, you remember? Yeah, yeah, no problem. It's fine. I'm not saying. Also, wait, why is it not showing on screen? Can I didn't realize that. It's so funny. Ah, man, why? Ah, why does it not work? Let me. What is it? Here. This one. Refresh. How do I refresh? Ah, there it is. Refresh. I hope it works. If it doesn't work, I guess. What do I use? Streamlabs? No, Stream Elements. Stream Elements might be down, probably. If it doesn't, or as in, if it does, I guess it was just my PC. I don't know. I think also, I remember seeing something about there being problems with, what was it? The way in which some browser sources work now for some reason. I don't even know why, but it's fine anyways. It's not always a necessity to have chat on screen. I guess we can. Nobody is going to actually die if we don't have that. Ah, but anyway, sorry. I got distracted. Uh, yeah, I am well. That's the answer. Everything is well. I also hope that you are doing well, Dharma. Welcome. Today, it's going to be, I guess, a long discussion. I was just starting. I was just slowly trying to develop the idea. I am just starting by mentioning this guy. Uh, I don't know how much. I think he hasn't truly become a more mainstream thinker or philosopher if he truly got to be called that by the popular, so to speak. Yeah, by the mainstream media and the general culture and such. But this guy, Emil Cioran, he's a very interesting guy. And I was saying, it's interesting to try and read somebody like him. I would even, to some degree, equal what he writes to somebody like Byung-Chul Han. It's nice to see how, in many ways, philosophy is quite a wonderful endeavor, or has allowed so many wide writers to say things that seem to possess some sort of substance. But I don't know. I have been also at the same time. I think it has taken me quite a long time to reach a realization of a different sort. It was quite a funny discovery, I guess, that there is another thing that happened with most of that people in terms of those who dedicate themselves to write about philosophy, and that both of these authors are some of the most recent ones that I have actually explored. I I also, yeah, I have also explored people like because of the obligations of having to read people so that I get to understand other writers. I have approximated, or approximated is not the exact term. I have approached people like Levinas and Althusser and such, and they're all interesting, yeah. But there is a weird shift in the way in which we in philosophy itself, let's say, I shouldn't be considering myself a philosopher. Um, the way in which in the most postmodern, I guess it's the proper category, more contemporaneous philosophy, we talk about stuff. I remember stuff. There is this. Uh, I think it's not exactly fair, but there is this whole category of the Nobel Prize for Literature and such. And those people, most of them end up writing stuff that, even if it itself isn't directly an philosophical explanation of the stuff, most of those authors try to express through in any kind of writing ideas of sorts that are not just interesting in the basic sense, but also that give more tools for the person to keep on thinking about the rest of the world. And well, that is to some degree true. There is also another weird phenomena, I think, that happens in which nowadays, that's what I was trying to go for. Nowadays, something very funny ends up also happening, and that is most of these things are. It's far easier to just say if we understand what is the concept that Plato utilizes of the world of ideas and the so-called real world. Many of those concepts that the most modern thinkers utilize and are capable of actually developing stay in the most ideal realm. It's actually quite impossible to be talking about anything that is cemented in reality. And it's quite, I don't know, I understand to some degree how wonderful it is to be talking about something like, oh yeah, how the how a person can be not just themselves, and they also can enjoy the experience of being what they get to be throughout their sustained existence, because through time we get to experience that not just the present us, but also the future and past us all live in unison, and that to some degree, for a person to be properly developed, so to speak, there is a necessity to grasp the concept between time and what existence also represents. This whole idea of time and being, and how, in many ways, it might as well refer to the same stuff. It's to name one of the most popular ideas, I guess. You can also, I wouldn't exactly call him a philosopher. I don't think it is exactly just philosophy. Linguistics and linguistic theories are, to some degree, yeah, interesting explanations about the world, but they are not just philosophy. It would be unfair to say that somebody like Chomsky is just a philosopher. He, even if he is an incredibly famous author, I wouldn't think that he, he himself will just consider his whole work a philosophical endeavor. It has many other areas of work in which it tries to create theories and whatnot that are not based around just the philosophical methods and whatnot. And even then, assuming that that might be true, the tiny portions that get to belong to the philosophical realm, all of that is still quite abstract. I think the modern philosophy, or the most modern type of philosophy, is incredibly incapable of actually talking about anything, not of substance, anything directly real. We have to make too many assumptions to understand what we are talking about. It has become quite a complicated endeavor to understand where is it that we are going with the theories in some cases. It's incredibly weird to see somebody talk so much about how a certain ideal person might exist and somebody of a certain of certain characteristics might get to be and whatnot. And I don't know. I think it's not that it makes understanding what is being talked about harder. It makes the whole prospect of getting truly a more actionable idea in our hands. That's what I feel happens, and that's what I sense is the natural phenomena in most of these cases. It's sad to see that, yeah, we don't actually get to realize or to gain so much directly utilize our knowledge. It's it's something that becomes less and less articulated with, I wouldn't just say reality. It's a different type of knowledge. What we have started to chase quite a while ago, so to speak, in the whole field of philosophy. It's weird to see that it becomes it's understandable. Once again, I will repeat that. I don't want that to not be a thing that I expressed properly enough. It's the theories themselves are understandable, but the ways in which they get to be applied in reality are not so understandable, are not so directly clear. It has become quite a mental endeavor to actually get to see how many of the things that one reads apply to ourselves, so to speak. I think that in certain ways, it's funny to see people of older age, so to speak, talk about stuff like philosophy and whatnot, and how, in some ways, yeah, it isn't a completely correct statement to say that philosophy is a science that dedicates itself to the discovery of any, or not to the discovery, to the discussion about the best mode of existence or the most optimal way in which one can get to live. More so because there is a funny thing that happens in philosophy that it tries to not exactly rule anyone in the ways in which they get to live, because at the same time, philosophy tries to always be quite an open. I don't think it is a fully exact term to utilize, but for the sake of being brief, science, it gets to be a very open science that is capable of, yeah, accepting many different perspectives and whatnot. Therefore, it doesn't actually enforce anyone to live in any one way, but at the same time, it also is slowly drifting further and further away from that. It's not an obligation that it has. I don't think that philosophy equals self-help. I don't think that it is a correct assessment, but it's annoying at the same time that, yeah, I remember a little while ago. as in, I don't know, a week or so, I said something along the lines of, yeah, philosophy has a very funny trait, and that is, it actually gets to be one of the few sciences, so to speak, that still gets to talk about an incredibly bizarre concept, that of the soul, you know? And I think it's kind of sad to see that we never again touched on that. We have slowly more and more departed from that. I remember, I haven't reading. I remember something very funny happening. It, it has become almost like a negative word. The different ways in which the religions and whatnot have made the whole discussion about more, I will say, even if they are still mental, more abstract in the way in which we are capable of actually representing them in our existence, but more applicable in the way in which they impact our existence. Concepts makes philosophy feel a lot weirder. It's I once again I'm not saying that philosophy is something bad. It's just that yeah, it lacks quite a lot of that. And I was trying to bring people of that sort, as I said before. You have Levinas, you have Stioran, you have Bill Jong Han. You have many people of that sort that in more recent times talk about things that do apply to the person, but they do so in a way in which it doesn't truly feel like there is a deeper concept behind that. I don't. I remember reading something funny. There are almost no more niches, so to speak. There hasn't been that much of a Plato or an Aristotle or a Socrates in recent times, and it's not that it requires someone to exist like that, but at the same time, it's sort of sad to see that it cannot produce another person of that same sort because the realm of ideas is quite a wide one, and it's strange to see how incapable we are of talking about more impactful things when philosophy is such a discipline that tries to be as widespread and as incredibly vague as it gets in many ways. There should be far more surprising conclusions. Not because it is time, but rather because this whole idea of we have so many people thinking about this stuff, it's surprising to see this. I guess, yeah, in some way it might be a fallacy, but we have more than 7 billion people existing right now. How is it that nobody can say anything interesting enough? I, I don't I don't mean it in a way of, oh, well, yeah, we need another leader. I'm not saying that. I am not saying that. I am just going for the idea of the human existence, even if it is something complex to fully understand. I guess the current times allow anybody who is interested in doing so to realize more and more how utterly surprising it is that we get to be ourselves in many ways, that many of the events that dictate our lives are in such ways that we take the decisions that we take, that everything is given the way it is given, and that all of that also needs to be fully understood so that we can say then that we have made sense out of what we are talking about. All of those things are surprising enough, but at the same time, they are also not something that you can actually find being described all that much in modern texts. I don't remember. I have to make one particular note. I remember I have been reading also some more, or on the contrary, less popular people. I think it has been quite a wonderful adventure to read people like, yeah, like, I think her name was something along the lines of Esther Vilar. There was this group of, I, the name that comes to mind is Gazette. It isn't Gazette. It's the guys who basically, I guess, started that whole schizoanalysis and whatnot with their multiple modes of understanding things and the body without organs and such. Deleuze and Guattari, yeah, those two. All of those kind of people have also said interesting things. I guess I don't know. I don't want to give other names because I know that they aren't exactly philosophers, but people like Durkheim or like Weber, they're incredibly interesting to also explore and to read. And it's sad to see that we don't get to properly appreciate how useful that their ideas are. We end up just staying in this more surface level of, oh, wow, yeah, we have a Byul Chung Han who's telling me, wow, yeah, the world is pushing me to suffer. And I don't know. I don't actually agree that much with all of that. It's not that I don't understand it. It's not that I cannot figure out, oh yeah, I go out and I can actually see somebody who is sort of dead on the inside because they have accustomed themselves of a way in which their whole existence is predicated on having to suffer the weight of their actions in the present day, having to carry all of their previous decisions without the possibility of ever changing ways. And now they have locked themselves in a system in which, if they were to ever change directions, they might as well just collapse and not find themselves at all enjoying a new, more prosperous life. It is, so to speak, it might be possible that, yeah, now more than ever, we can all, if we take the wrong steps, so to speak, lock ourselves in an endless or in an unescapable rat race, I guess it's the more common term. And, it is understandable, yeah, but at the same time, it's not fully capable of expressing a reality. It makes it feel far more disingenuous. It is in that same term that it feels weird. It's that self-policing nature of, oh, well, yeah, here we are, us who have chosen differently. Here is the person who is condemned to suffer. And it becomes quite a lot more selfish of an endeavor. I don't know if it is in itself something utterly bad. I I am still trying to deal with that idea, I guess. It is in some ways it's necessary to first and foremost be capable of bearing my own existence before I can talk about anyone else. No? It's an understandable statement. But at the same time, it's also complicated to, at any other point in time, care about the other person, care about who they are, what they say, what they might bring to the table, so to speak, if I never give them a chance to express anything of, in a certain way, not just value, but rather something that I can apply without making the other person seem like a lesser being just because they are not me. I I have read, yeah, a little bit more of postmodern stuff like Foucault and Sartre and such, and there are some weird views. I mean, I don't think it's all that controversial of a take for anybody who traverses those texts. Even if you read someone like Simone de Beauvoir, you are going to find something weird along the lines of we make quite a normal habit out of detaching the rest of the world from ourselves. One of the dangerous concepts that came to be, I don't even know exactly from where. Wait, I think I do. Okay, this weird concept of this otherness that plagues the narratives of, oh wow, yeah, this is the enemy. This is the other thing that I need to subdue, the thing that I need to control, the thing that I have to, through my will to power, subordinate, or that I am forced to stay in a lesser position because if they don't place themselves, or if I don't force them to be in such a position, my own existence then becomes something negative. There are way too many narratives of that sort, and that's where I was trying to go. Even when I read somebody like Sioran, I find very similar conclusions. It's like, oh yeah, the world is such a desolate place that makes me suffer so much because there is no solace for a soul that has been tired. There is no thing that gives me a flame. There is no light to be found in the future because the only meaningful part of existence is the fact that there is a promised liberation from it and nothing else. Even in those ideas, I don't actually find something useful. I, I, I keep on reading, but what I see more and more is this weird necessity to always justify stuff. I remember when I read somebody like Stirner. I mean, nowadays he's slowly being talked about a little bit more, but when he wrote his stuff, when he wrote his texts and whatnot, he was a completely, so to speak, isolated guy. He was somebody who never got to say anything or who never got to possess any level of fame, so to speak, because his ideas at that point in time weren't actually all that impactful. But nowadays it finally becomes far more relevant. Yeah, many philosophical takes feel just like that thing of wow, I have to justify my own existence in some way in which I get to feel good. And philosophy feels like an easy way out for that, sadly. People like I remember when I was visiting for the first time Nietzsche, it was a funny exercise to actually find out that yeah, a nihilist isn't actually that much of a dangerous thing. If it is not much more than just a basic person who lacks an understanding, a thorough explanation of the world, and who hasn't actually given themselves the time to develop their own knowledge about things, it isn't really all that bad. If a pessimist is just somebody who has given up hope because the few bad experiences that they had have already biased them to think that everything else is going to be as equally negative, if the few encounters with the reality that they had makes the rest of the encoding or deciphering that they express out to the world, make it so that they feel like everything is always going to lead to just worse consequences. All of those things. are understandable, but they're not really all that deep. We can overcomplicate it and we can make it look like a far more dangerous or cynical thing. Oh wow, no. The nihilist person who gets to dominate the world, who now populates all of the known areas of life and who contaminates the popular speech with ideas that only bring destruction. Yeah, to some degree, it is true. I understand it, but at the same time, I don't know. It's just like when you talk with a kid who's going through a depressive episode, it's not that complicated. There are already, since antiquity, many wonderful tools to discuss things properly, to be capable of getting to conclusions that lead to other consequences, and to be capable of holding in themselves discussions of any weight. And all of that becomes much less valued. It's, oh no, one, they are coming, the black wave of, or the dark wave of the most pessimistic human beings is slowly approaching reality, and we are all condemned. No, man. If all that we can believe on are fallacies, it becomes far more easier to slowly get rid of all of those things. I don't see how is it that the normal narrative of, oh yeah, yeah, no, the endeavor of reading philosophy is a dangerous one because, when you decide to read philosophy, you embark on a journey that might change the way in which you see the world. Any kind of thing that you read will change you. It's impossible to not have a discussion with what you explore, but at the same time, I don't think that it is all that bad to become aware about the world in which we live. It's, let's say it like this, if part of the experience of being alive is to get to slowly realize what it means to be alive, this whole concept of, okay, not only I understand myself, but I also develop this wonderful thing, empathy. If I slowly get to have empathy for the rest of the world, I have to also possess knowledge about those other things. And out of nowhere, it becomes like a habit to make anything that might be a minimal issue look like the worst thing ever. And all of those parts of existence become the most annoying weights to deal with. Once we have to live, and once we have to be, and once we have to also keep on existing. And I don't know, I don't actually agree with all of that. I think since days of old, philosophy has come to be quite a wonderful, once again, I guess, discipline. It, it has a potential to talk about many things in a way in which no other discipline itself has. It's the degrees of detachment that it possesses from the complete certainty of the world and the complete scientific method are wonderful. Things like the whole symbolic world, the capacity to understand anything that is associated with this more distant mode of analysis of reality, of symbols, or not just symbols. It's this whole idea of, once again, semiotics and whatnot that allows us to slowly explore things from a far more distant, or okay, let me say like this. the way in which something like semiotics allows to distance ourselves or allows us to distance ourselves from the normal modes of interpretation of what is the normal things which we experience is still underappreciated. It's weird to be talking about it because it should be the norm. It should be not something that needs to be stated. Many obviousness. Is it a proper sentence? Obviousnesses. I don't think it's a real word. Many obvious things, many obvious things exist, and most of those, for some reason, go unmentioned. It's like, oh yeah, you know what? I remember this whole concept of, yeah, it's not actually all that necessary to read a book. True, but at the same time, it's not something that is actually going to kill anyone. It's not something that has to lead only to bad conclusions. I remember the first time that I was exploring somebody like, once again, the best example that I know of, Theoran, or somebody, I guess even if you might be weak enough, even somebody like Bukowski might represent in some way an incredibly negative and harmful way of seeing life, no? And all of that is not the end of existence. You slowly get to read them to understand what they are trying to refer to, and after that, life keeps going, and it doesn't need to be such a tragic experience. It's the same as when we have to read somebody like Nietzsche, and oh no, wow, he's criticizing so much of the previous times. It's necessary if we want to understand where we are standing right now. It's necessary to have that experience. It's the same with getting to see somebody being cynical, with somebody being incredibly dark in the ways in which they talk about the stuff. It's it's I wouldn't even say just complicated. I don't expect it to be so possible to reach surprising discoveries out the world only from living the best possible life in terms of having no moments of struggle against ideas that might completely oppose the ways in which we live right now. Philosophy is characterized by this constant struggle between different ideas always fighting one another. It's meaningless to not have that happen more. And that's what I see nowadays happening. Oh yeah, yeah. I have so many available books. Let me grab one. What they are talking about? Oh wow. Poor me who is living a life of suffering because the system is making me suffer. Because it exhausts my soul. And then I cannot choose anything. Poor me because I finally get to see how dark it is to have to keep on existing. It's not something that leads to much else. It feels like in the present times, that's what I am trying to actually say. Most of philosophy doesn't really lead to that much of a deep conclusion, even if they are complicated to read paragraphs, even if the words themselves are out of the things that we read each and every single day of our life. There is still a component of basicness behind what the actual idea is. In the more modern creations, not much has. value. And that's, I don't know, I think it's this disconcerting. Once again, modern times should have led to many more wonderful things happening. And I don't know. I think yeah, to some degree something funny happens also. It's like you know this idea of the elephant in the room. Yeah, there are some other ideas that are still incredibly surprising that might be a little bit more modern. But sadly, something that has failed to do in itself, I guess, philosophy. And unavoidably, every single philosopher that has gotten to live so far that hasn't been capable of tackling that problem, also, it is that, yeah, it has allowed itself to be quite subdued by the rest of the world. We should be capable of mentioning ideas in themselves without having to refer to the thinkers that are behind them. It doesn't matter who said exactly what. If the idea itself is valuable, it doesn't need to live or discussions just because the person behind them was actually bad. There are many cases. The rest of the popular culture might as well be like that, but for some reason, philosophy has this weird attachment to the purity of the person who talks about whatever. Nietzsche might as well not have been that much of a clever human being, because in the end, he went crazy just because he saw a horse being beaten. Wow. Now that invalidates his whole development of ideas. Who is it? Socrates isn't somebody all that valuable because he ended up being executed. It's it's weird. We have a weird mode of understanding stuff. And once again, I don't really feel like it happens on every single discipline. You can have that in other areas of knowledge to a certain extent, but even then, we are capable of slowly fixing them. It is an almost, how do you say it in English? Recons. Unfixable, let's say it. That one I can say unfixable issue of people and the way, or the existence of a person themselves and the existence of their ideas. There is always a connection that cannot be separated, and we do not have a way to actually address that issue. And we are staying in such a basic level of, oh wow, yeah. Nowadays, nobody might as well even get to say anything interesting because nobody is all that important. And even if they are, even if the philosophical declarations come from somebody in a position of power, as long as their history doesn't add up to that statement, even if unavoidably that doesn't have anything to do with who they are, automatically that gets discarded. And it's so weird to see that. It feels like almost it has decided to let itself die, philosophy, in many ways. I don't think it actually has. I want to believe that it hasn't. Mostly also because I guess way too many people are still choosing that as something to do with their time, something to occupy themselves with. But in the rest of the areas of philosophy, in what respects to the more normal or more current statements, ideas, I don't see that much. I don't feel like there is anything actually going on. Right now, there are way too many seeds that were left from older times, but I don't see currently much happening. And I don't know, that is, I said before, it's sort of disconcerting. It shouldn't be something that we should have to be talking about. Philosophy has in itself already so much history. It's, to a certain degree, it's, yeah, the oldest of the quote unquote sciences. It's not truly a science, but even if it isn't exactly a science, it has given us so many things, and yet we are so incapable of doing anything else with it right now. It's not, yeah, okay. Before it gets, I guess, say, I don't know, 5 years from now. No, it's not about, oh, wow, yeah, you know what, this was actually attachment to, you know, the dying father, or something like that. This way of explaining the necessity to keep on holding to those slowly dying traditions. No, 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 no. It's just that, in a certain way, philosophy brings many tools that many other disciplines don't possess, actually. Once again, just the idea that through discussions, things get to be fixed, gets to be solved. I don't see that in many other areas of life. The more modern way of conceiving things and having to talk about the stuff and these more unavoidably scientific methods make everything else far less actually solvable. They make it potentially more solvable, but the moment in which I have to spend, instead of just 5 minutes talking with someone so that we get to understand ourselves, and we have to instead spend 10 hours me creating something that is replicable, the other person trying to replicate it to the best of their capacities, both of us comparing results, then after that, only then seeing or having to revise it maybe a second time, and after that, then, yes, seeing which one of them is correct. In some cases, it's not so much of of a necessity to do that. The human being doesn't actually live in so many directly cemented in the most scientific events reality. We don't have every single day of our life things that make us go crazy, so to speak, or discover everything else out there. It's a far more simple event. And I don't know, that's what I'm trying to say, that I feel lax nowadays. And I feel, yeah, the modern philosopher is sort of absent from the world. I remember the other day I was talking about, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. It's necessary to slowly create a sense of detachment from the rest of things. But somehow, that isn't something that comes absolutely from nowhere. I remember, I haven't, as I was saying, I have been studying a little bit. It's supposedly something that is common in many of the different religions that we possess nowadays. You can see that in Buddhism, in Christianity, in all their conceptions of God and such, the ways in which we slowly try to always say the person needs to be less attached to the real world. Okay, but for some reason, when it comes to somebody who deals with philosophy, it seems like the most rational assumption becomes, yeah, you know what? I have to actually not involve myself in anything because I am allowing myself to be detached. I remember when I was exploring something, I, it was related to how in the Middle East and such, the different modes in which they were capable of reaching much more quote unquote profound ideas or more advanced ideas for those times was also associated with the ways in which their whole societies were arranged and how much more they possessed in comparison to the average person and such from the from the western world like us, yeah. But at the same time, it somehow feels like the playfield has sort of been equalized quite a lot more nowadays. It stopped being that situation in which, oh, well, yeah, yeah, only if you are utterly rich, you get to think. I don't know. I remember talking about it in a different context. We have so much death time. Anyone can actually allow themselves to find time to think out stuff. It's weird how little we can talk about that. It's weird how little we're accustomed to ever mentioning that. I don't know. It's like a surprising declaration to say, oh, well, yeah, you know what? I have maybe 2 hours, 3 hours, 5 hours that I can utilize throughout my day to, instead of, I don't know, watching a series, think about things, process stuff, be capable of continuing with things that I have to do, be capable of keep on elaborating in any idea that affects then, yes, my life. It's not just entertainment. It's weird. I feel like philosophy in that sense, yeah, has come to a weird conclusion of sorts. It isn't really a conclusion. I don't think it is once again the end, but I do think it is a weird position to be in. I don't think it is all that useful or all that enlightening. It's just strange to see that. And yeah, once again, unavoidably. Or, well, no. I want, again, let me also, I have a certain hypothesis as to why also that happened. This one is complicated to mention. I, I should probably try to later on. I was thinking about it. I will probably, after I finish the first essay, this is going to be the second one. Uh, Here, right now, it's far more, I wouldn't say exactly dangerous, far more risky to pronounce. It's, yeah, they are not exactly the same thing. It's not some a cognito hazard, so to speak, but rather, wow, I don't know if by saying it out loud it actually gets to be all that useful for anyone. But let me try to say it like this. I can also sadly understand why philosophy, this whole idea of through the historical analysis of ideas, something very funny comes to light. That is how, in itself, philosophy has always played such a huge role in existence of most of us, even if it never or almost never it got to truly be the reality that idea which I think it was Plato proposed of the philosopher king being the actual one ruling the world comes directly to fruition, even if that isn't what happens exactly, still some other parts of life come to light of, wow, you know what happens? Many philosophical concepts end up affecting the rest of the world. And modifying the way in which history moves. And in some cases, it isn't even for the good that it has happened in such a way. In some cases, it has come to be that, yeah, somebody says something, not exactly in a negative way, but unavoidably something dangerous, something at that time, yeah, maybe even bad, maybe even mm, that ended up having negative repercussions, you know? And it has happened through so many times because that's the wonderfulness of philosophy. Sometimes ideas can take much more of a hold of a person than any other thing, and sadly, they don't actually get to be fully thereafter with such care so that somebody stops being affected by it at the first glance or can stop themselves from going to the worst end possible of any hypothesis, philosophical hypothesis, so to speak. And then, after so many of those cases, what we see now is wow, yeah, you know what? It's better to not have philosophy because it's a dangerous thing. It has already demonstrated itself to have failed. I don't know, man. I don't think it's actually all that useful to discard wholly the adventure of thinking about this stuff. I think it's a requirement of sorts. And I don't know. Yeah, I have. Once again, I'm not going to shy away and say, oh no, yeah, I don't know about psychology. Maybe it can be. No, man, it cannot be a replacement of any kind. You can understand the phenomena that happens, the things more sort of scientific behind any kind of event that is related to the mind itself. Okay, we can have neuroscience and neurobiology and the way in which or scenes, but what is it? Behavioral biology, I think it is called, and such, that demonstrates why humans act in the way in which they act. But there is still that other side of the person that has to deal with ideas. If we are not capable of talking out the stuff, if we are not capable of thinking out the world, it won't happen. The conclusions are going to be reached. There are more scenarios. I don't think that the development of humanity is a realistic idea to look forward to. No matter how much we want to, even if, let's say like this, even if the whole or the big majority of humanity wants to destroy one another, even if we are by nature aggressive species that wants to kill each other, there is always going to be a little bit of us that will remain. Not because, oh wow, yeah, you know what, I needed to have hope in something else or else I am going to go correct. No, man, it's the reality. At this point in time, we have so many people alive. Even if we remain just a handful of us, it's going to happen that the world is keep on, so to speak, evolving, and that the human species is going to find a way to prosper even after all of that. So it's weird to then, yeah, come to the conclusion that, yeah, you know what? No more thinking out anything. No more minding the business of the existence that we have to carry through. I understand it, once again. It's not that at the same time, it has no reason whatsoever. Those other explanations of, yeah, you know what, the world tires you, the world makes you unable of thinking. But, I don't know, man. I can live alive. That can tire me out. But I also have some days in which I do absolutely nothing. in which I just indulge in the most basic pleasures just because I choose to do that, just because I am willing to do that. I am going to act like a saint and say, oh yeah, you know what? If I don't have those things, I am going to die. I don't know how much of a reasonable thing to say that is. I remember this idea of something funny that happens, at least in the Latin American culture, is how, in many cases, people of my age have this issue of you gain barely enough so that you get to make a basic enough salary to sustain yourself, and the minimal extra gains that you have, you end up spending them on just basic pleasures and vices that come once a week in the form of a party, or once a month in the form of a celebration of other sorts. And that isn't a necessity. Once again, that's just something that I have slowly accepted as an implanted desire. This we have such a capacity to talk out the other, but somehow when it comes to see how this certain other or uncertain other affects my own way of being, I cannot ever say, yeah, you know what? Sometimes I don't want things because I want them myself. I want them because everyone else is saying so. Philosophy should be something that most of us should actually be capable of having an internal desire for, not something that comes out of nowhere, that we are forced to think. Once again, this whole idea of I have to actually sit with my own self for my whole life. I can try to evade myself with drugs, but even then, I have no way of actually never being with my own existence. If not, what? I am going to actually literally decide to kill myself because I cannot bear the weight of having to live with my own mind? It's kind of weird to see how much of a surrender it ended up having, all of that aspect of the more useful philosophy, so to speak. How incapable it is of actually stating, yeah, you know what? Thinking is not an issue. It doesn't represent an actual problem, or it doesn't need to represent a problem. It can be something that gives life to other things, that gives rise to other concepts, that allows us to slowly, I wouldn't say exactly just move forward. I wouldn't say it in, once again, in the sense of, oh, yeah. If you don't read philosophy, your life has no meaning. Not in that sense, but it's along the lines of, by actually having an interest in philosophy, we should be capable of seeing some sort of benefit, not so much just momentary pleasure. The same thing as with other vices. That's why it feels weird. But yeah, I don't know. Let me drink some water. Actually, I think I have. I don't know. I haven't talking probably non-stop. Let me drink some water. Thank you. And I don't know, man. I think that it's we already have. Okay, maybe I think this is one of those parts that hasn't been understandable all that much because partially I also didn't want myself to spend time on that. But yeah, we already have way too many other developments from older times. I did mention them in the sense of, yeah, we have had wonderful creators and thinkers and whatnot in ancient eras. It's wonderful to actually get to understand the stuff like, yeah, once again, somebody like Nietzsche, like Descartes. I would even go as far as to talk about people like, for example, the different epistemologists. All of that stuff is good to read, to explore. It's interesting, useful. It adds to our existence. It's not that there is absolutely nothing to gain. But once again, it's sad to see that in the present time, we are not capable of having more of those things, even. There is this whole idea of things only go into further stages of development. I don't think that a later stage of development of philosophy is to actually not have anything else being said of weight, no new transforming idea about this world being stated. It's sad to have that. It's depressing to have that be our reality. And that doesn't feel like the actual ending of philosophy. I said it before, it just feels like anyone who was interested in philosophy rather gave up on it more than anything else. But yeah, at least I can say in older texts there are still ideas that are still, even today, applicable, wonderful, useful. And I don't know. I do think sadly that yes, much of that is somewhat lacking in development. But at least it's something. That's also, I guess, part of being who we get to be. That in many cases, even if what we are experiencing in front of us right now is not the most intricate, well developed, fully articulated thing, we can also continue developing, building on that ourselves. Ideas don't die once the person who is telling them to us shuts up. The wonderfulness of knowing something is to also become aware that, yeah, if I do actually understand it, I can continue working on it myself. And I can continue giving it even more shape, more sense, make it more useful, you know? That's something that I feel is lacking in many other scenarios. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's crazy to see that. It's unavoidably surprising to see, as always, how little we can talk about all of that. We lose ourselves in all of the other more modern conceptions of philosophy, more modern ways of talking about it, of saying anything about it. It doesn't feel like we get to or towards anywhere in the present. But at least that's just my observation, I guess. But yeah, I guess that's it. I don't know. That's what I was thinking about. I want. I mean, that's as much as I had been thinking about it to a certain degree. Once again, I do know that it's, let me say it like this, I don't think that in itself reading different philosophical ideas is the easiest task to do. In some cases, it also requires a lot of will to actually confront some descriptions. I guess there is somewhat of an appropriate idea within Nietzsche in terms of, oh yeah, when the void, or when the human gazes upon the void glares back, and it is then that the human understands the whole deepness of it. Okay, having a discipline that is willful to actually talk out some of the dark aspects of life with, I wouldn't say such clarity. Even then, even nowadays, we don't have as much of a cl- clear view on some things, on many things, but at least it's something. And, and even if it is challenging in many cases, it is a feasible adventure to go on. That's, at that point, yes, good enough, satisfactory enough to try and embark on. But yeah, I don't know. I guess that's it. Now for real. That's that's my whole view on that. I guess. Thank you for it. No, yeah, I I don't know. Read something. The conclusion is, let me ask this question. Okay, after so much, what should you actually read? I don't know, man. I would actually, the only thing that I do always recommend is always, yeah, semiotics stuff. I guess. What's this guy? I have so many names. It's so complicated sometimes. When give me like half a minute so that I can actually remember who I am trying to talk about. I was going to say Darwin. Unavoidably, it isn't Darwin. Uh, okay, I cannot actually give you the name, but se- semiology or semiotics. The guy who developed semiotics on America, the first, that one, that's who you should read. Thank you. Also, I guess Unavoidably Suicide. Ferdinand de Saussure is also good, but they are not the same thing. One is linguistics, the other is then, yeah, much more about philosophy. Also, at the same time, something funny is that if you read this guy who talks out semiotics, you're going to end up finding out that his way of describing things can serve much more to later on explore people like Hegel, who are supposedly utterly necessary to read, utterly important and impactful in the way in which one gets to understand the world. So, I don't know. I guess, yeah. Just read something. At this point in time, I'm pretty sure most people know that they should read anything. So, grab the book that you know that you have to continue reading. That's my best recommendation. Finish them. Don't start anything. It's meaningless to start something completely new. Finish the previous library. Then, yeah, go towards new places to keep on discovering stuff. But yeah, now for real. Thank you. It's been a very good day, but I don't actually have much more to say. Or I will limit myself to saying just this much, I guess. I I don't know. Once again, I don't think that philosophy is in a bad place, but it's just that I feel like that's a good conclusion. So yeah, do yourself a favor and live honorably, properly, live while also being hydrated, I guess. But yeah, thank you. Good night, good evening, good day. Peace. I'm out.